It's funny that you kind of asked that today because I was chatting with Liv Giles because I just came from training, and she said that somebody had told her it's like a heel hook of the arm with how it rotates the elbow. And I kind of like thought about it for a second. I'm like, that's pretty accurate. It is almost like a heel hook of the arm where it's causing rotational and lateral pressure through the elbow, similar to how a heel hook would through the knee.
Welcome to Forever White Belt. I'm your host, Adele Fornarino. In this episode, we've got an absolutely incredible guest joining us, none other than Adele Fornarino, the 2024 ADCC Double Gold World Champion. Adele has taken the world of grappling by storm, making history as the first Australian to win ADCC and the first to take the open class title. She's a jiu-jitsu black belt under David Hart of Team Dominance MMA, and she's been an unstoppable force since 2022 when she won the IBJJF World No-Gi title as a brown belt and dominated the Oceania and Asia ADCC Qualifiers. Adele has trained with some of the best in the game, including Andre Galvao, representing the team at ATOS HQ. She's also trained with Lachlan Giles and the team at Absolute MMA, and more. Today we're going to dive into her journey, how she's processed her incredible achievements, and what's next for the groundbreaking athlete. So without further ado, I give you Adele Fornarino, the 2024 Double Gold ADCC World Champion. Adele, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for opening up the space and wanting to have a chat with me.
Big news, right? What's been happening with you lately? Anything?
Just a casual weekend. Went to Vegas, did a thing, and then came back home. But it's been an absolute whirlwind. The past past 48 hours, past week, the past few months have just been absolutely insane for me.
It's been so fun to watch, all the press and anything, that you've done, as well as obviously the event itself and your performances and the immediate aftermath. And now with this, I'm glad we have this a bit of breath of time here for you to, be settled at home. How's that going now, processing?
It still hasn't sunk in. I'm waking up every morning just kind of pinching myself, looking at my phone and seeing all the congratulatory messages that I'm getting and just still making sense of what happens. I go into the lounge room for breakfast and I'm walking past my ADCC belt and I just kind of have a moment of just what actually just happened. It's still crazy, but I'm very grateful to be back home in Australia, spending some time with my family because I've been away from home for a really big chunk of time. So just getting back into routine is really nice. Spending time with the family is really nice, and just settling for a moment is very nice.
For those that maybe don't know as much about you as they should, can you tell us a bit of your evolution to sort of where you are now, the different academies where, I've heard of like Dominance, I've heard Lachlan's name thrown around a bit, and then coming over here, I hear ATOS and things. Can you give us the evolution of Adele here?
100%. So I started training in Melbourne. So I'm originally from Melbourne, born and bred in Melbourne. I originally started training when I was 10 years old at an academy called Dominance MMA, which is an academy here that's about 15 minutes from me. The reason I chose it was because it was the closest place. I had no idea about martial arts. I had no idea about what style of martial art was the best one and what one was the most practical and all that kind of stuff. I picked based on location, and Dominance was the closest place to me. And it just happened to be that it was jiu-jitsu, and it happened to be that at the time it was an amazing kids coach that kind of drew me in and kept me interested in it. And still to this day train there, but for 15 years I've been there. And then a little bit further down the track, I started traveling when I was about 16 years old, treating it a little bit more seriously and doing more international competitions and just almost testing out to see what gyms in the States were best suited for me, where I could do some training camps there and just kind of have a home base in America, because majority of the opportunities, the majority of the massive events were in America. So I definitely wanted to have some kind of home base there. And I tried out a few, but the one that I just kind of kept coming back to was ATOS. I kept coming back there because the training there was fantastic. Gi and no-gi, the training there was absolutely incredible. But I think the most important thing for me was the actual culture there. The kind of culture that Andre and Angelica that goes from the top down of just positivity and enjoyment of the sport, and very much a group dynamic where everybody's pushing to improve each other. That's what I really enjoyed about the space, and that's how that relationship started. So now when I have major events coming up, or when I'm in the States, like ATOS is where I'll train and where I'll do majority of my major training camps. But when I'm in Australia nowadays, I'll train between Dominance MMA, who that's owned by David Hart, and he's been kind of my coach since I was 10 years old, and he gave me my black belt. But I also train out of Absolute, where you guys would know Liv and Lachlan, who are just producing amazing athletes and themselves have phenomenal careers. So learning from them is an amazing opportunity. So I'd be silly not to take advantage of the fact that they're a 20-minute drive from me.
Now, there's such an explosion of talent that perhaps has always been there coming out of Australia right now that I think the globe is finally, waking up to. But I heard you mention before a program of some sort that Lachlan has for athletes in Australia in terms of like certain type of funding and criteria to get certain things like travel and things like that. Can you touch on that and explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so Lockie has some friends in high places that have a decent amount of money, and they were nice enough to actually donate a substantial amount of money to Lockie, and with the kind of underlying thing of putting it back into the Australian Jiu-Jitsu community. So there weren't any kind of stipulations that the person who donated the money had. It was more Lockie came up with his own criteria about where he thought the money would benefit the most. And what he came up with was supporting some of the athletes that were at the higher end of things, that were wanting to break through onto the main stage, but just were struggling financially to make it to the major events or do the training camps in America, or, afford the things like strength and conditioning, rehabilitation, things like all those things that do cost an athlete, especially in a sport where there's not a lot of money coming in. When we get things like donations that we can put towards that kind of stuff, we can treat ourselves as athletes a little bit more professional, where we can spend the money on things like strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionists, things like that. And the kind of stipulations that Lockie put behind that was you have to have certain accolades. So your accolades have to meet a certain level, have to spend at least 6 months in Australia feeding back into the Australian Jiu-Jitsu scene, and have to be a natural athlete. So not taking any performance-enhancing drugs. And he even went to the extent of testing a whole bunch of athletes in Australia. So he randomized tested us. And we had, I think it was something like 2 days notice, where we just had to go in where we were told to go, give a sample, and, obviously have the results be clear. And then that was what allowed us to have any of the money come to us. Yeah. So
your game, having studied a lot of your matches, I've been trying to pigeonhole you somehow, and you have a really interesting sort of, it's a difficult thing to do, because I hear often these different types of descriptors for you, like aggressive, patient, tactical, and all these things. And how would you describe your game, and your evolution too, and how you've evolved?
For me, I think the main thing that I want to long-term be known as is well-rounded. I think it's really important to me to have all areas of my game be very strong. I don't want to be put in a situation where I'm not comfortable on the competition mats. I want it to be that no matter where I'm put, no matter what I have to do within that match, no matter what the scoreboard is saying, that I'm strong and confident in the positions that I'm put in. So I want to be able to play top, bottom, leg locks, upper body attacks, guillotines, wrestling, whatever it's going to be. I want to be comfortable there. But I think to this point, the main thing that people used to describe me as submission orientated. I really like hunting for submissions. I think that's the whole point behind jiu-jitsu. I don't think the main point of jiu-jitsu is to hold a position and see how long you can stall out a match. I think it's about putting away your opponent, and that's what I've kind of always gravitated towards. Even when I was quite young, that was my main style of jiu-jitsu, was mainly arm bars when I was quite young, but now that's kind of evolved into all submissions, and that's what I get the most joy out of doing jiu-jitsu is submission hunting.
It's interesting because I've seen you post matches where perhaps a submission hasn't happened, or it's a 0-0, or there's an advantage type of thing, and you're fully aware of this. You're fully aware at the end that you typically will say something like, you almost apologize. You actually do apologize sometimes that it wasn't more exciting or something like that. Can you talk about that sort of awareness?
I think that especially for things like fight shows where people have paid to actually be there, where people have either paid for the stream or paid to actually physically be there, our job as athletes is to put on a performance for the viewer. It's not, can I win like the skin of my teeth? Can I get an advantage and hold out for the rest of the match? It's to put on a performance for these guys that they can enjoy. They're paying for a service. I want to be able to provide them with that service. But not only that, it's also... These events are hosted to showcase how interesting jiu-jitsu can be, especially for people that are not as deep into the rabbit hole of jiu-jitsu, people that are just kind of seeing it for the first time. Our job is to show these guys what jiu-jitsu is, interest them in jiu-jitsu, pull them into the jiu-jitsu community, and then grow by just showing them how interesting and fun it can be.
That's interesting because you're almost making it sound like there's an element of you being an entertainer as well as an athlete.
I do think there is an element of that. I absolutely do. I think that there's a reason why you'd call it a fight show, because we're there to put on a show for the audience. There's a reason why people pay to go and see it, because that's what's going to make our sport grow. More eyes on the sport is going to lead to better funding. It's going to lead to the sport improving and becoming a more professional sport, but that starts with viewership.
Just a reminder to please give us a 5-star review on Apple Music and Spotify and become a VIP member for only 99 cents a month. Get ad-free episodes at anchor.fm/foreverwhitebelt/subscribe. And check us out on Instagram at Forever White Belt Show. Go buy your Forever White Belt swag at teespring.com/forever-white-belt. Check us out on YouTube now at Forever White Belt. Finally, if you ever get to beautiful Northern California, please come roll with us at North Bay Jiu-Jitsu in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. They're amazing instructors and everyone there are great people. Mention the podcast and get 2 weeks free. In your mind, what makes a great competitor?
Risk-taking. I think it's important to risk take, top position, bottom position, be willing to move, be willing to experiment on the stage in front of people. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. At home, we call it putting it in the fuck it bucket. So it's just like you just gotta kind of throw away all the fear and just go for it, and that's what leads to interesting matches. You know, we had a bunch of interesting matches this weekend, but the most interesting ones were the ones where there was a lot of just back and forth going on and a lot of like trying to get position but releasing that position to chase something different. Those matches are much more interesting than, hey, can I hold top of side control for 20 minutes and get an advantage and win? Like, nobody really talks about those matches.
Do you think that's influenced by a certain rule set?
I think every rule set can be gamed. I think every rule set you can take advantage of. I think the only rule set that it's more difficult to take advantage of is a submission-only rule set. But even with that, you get big guys that are just pushing and pulling each other for 20 minutes, and then in the last minute they're going ballistic to try and get a decision by the scrape of their teeth. I think most rule sets can be gamed. I think it's more so to do with like incentivizing the competitors to try and get submissions, and I think that's what's going to lead to more interesting matches. You saw it, like, not to want to bring up CJI, because obviously I was on ADCC, I was on the competitive show, but you saw it when $1 million is on the line. There were some interesting matches. They're incentivized to want to push as hard as they can.
You bring up CJI, so I'll bring up CJI. Your thoughts on CJI? Now, you know, in retrospect, and would you take $1 million?
I have all the respect in the world for what ADCC has done and continues to do, and what it does for the athletes and the platform that it provides them, and also just the time and energy that Mo himself puts into the event itself. It is a incredibly complex show with so many moving parts and so many elements, and I can only imagine the work and energy and effort that goes into that with all the people that were working for ADCC. Obviously, when CJI came through, it put a spanner in the work. It was a lot of, from an athlete's perspective, it was a lot of like unanswered questions and being really unsure about what the future held for each show, whether that be CJI, whether that be ADCC. It was, to be honest, a little bit scary to know what was going on. You know, one of these shows could have gone belly up and that would have left a whole bunch of athletes with nowhere to go. But at the end of the day, it elevated both. I think the athletes from ADCC were maybe better compensated than they would have been otherwise. And obviously the CJI athletes got the opportunity of a lifetime to fight for $1 million. And the answer is, if there's $1 million on the line, I'd be silly not to say yes. I think that $1 million is $1 million. It is honestly life-changing money for anyone at this stage. So would I fight for $1 million? Yes, I would fight for $1 million.
Okay. It's official. Adele does not hate money, everyone. So please
send
her money at will.
I definitely do not hate money. As a jiu-jitsu athlete, I definitely do not hate money. We'll just have to see what happens down the track with CJI, and what happens if it's going to be a continuous thing. If it's going to come up next year, then we wait and see what the opportunities are with that.
Did you watch the event? Did you see any of the post fights or anything? Come on.
I did watch the event. I had some friends on the event that I definitely wanted to support. I'm from Australia and train at Absolute, so I train regularly with Levi Jones, and he's incredible and put on an incredible performance. I'm also out of ATOS, and I've seen the Rotula brothers train, so that was just incredibly stressful finals for me. But I think that both of them just did an incredible job and showed what jiu-jitsu is and gave so much heart out there.
Well, let's talk about one of the highlights, or how would you describe it? It's almost like a mirror lock type of thing, arm sort of twist in. How would you describe? Can you describe it for? Now, pretend we're not on video here, right? If someone's just purely listening, because I have a large listening cohort as well. Go figure. Describe this thing, the mechanics of it, and how are you thinking of it in terms of like execution?
So it's funny that you kind of asked that today, because I was chatting with Liv Giles, because I just came from training, and she said that somebody had told her it's like a heel hook of the arm with how it rotates the elbow. And I kind of like thought about it for a second. I'm like, that's pretty accurate. It is almost like a heel hook of the arm, where it's causing rotational and lateral pressure through the elbows, similar to how a heel hook would through the knee. The way that, like, when I'm executing it, what I'm thinking about mainly is trapping and almost hyperextending the elbow, like similar to a cutting armbar, with a little bit more rotation and a little bit more of a bend through the elbow. So it's not necessarily a straight arm, it's more so like a bent arm. So it's a little bit of like a hybrid of a cutting armbar and a Kimura trap in a little bit of a funky way. But I think that Liv hit the nail on the head, where it's a heel hook of the elbow.
It was fascinating to watch, because when you were elevated, doing it in the air essentially, you did rotate your body, you did twist to the side, and you got this diagonal sort of tilt happening. Were you looking for an optimized mechanical position? Well,
as soon as I got the overhook, I felt like it was quite deep. I have a system that I've been working on from the overhook position in general. For me, it's a really strong part of my game, and one of those tools that I really like to use is the mirror lock. So I knew that when it was deep and I had that chest-to-chest connection and she picked me up, I knew that it was going to be a really good tool to use to straighten out her arm and finish the submission from there. So I felt confident in the finishing mechanics as soon as I had that overhook.
And you're doing this gi, no gi, elevated or on your back, everywhere, huh?
Yeah, elevated on my back, gi, no gi, closed guard, half guards, butterfly guards, like half butterflies. It's a pretty versatile position. The overhook in general for me is a really versatile position. There's some key fundamental ideas that you just want to have down pat, and then you can just kind of copy and paste it through a bunch of different guard positions.
I've heard you mention previously that you said that this was like a different type of training camp for yourself and a different type of mentality. Can you give us some specifics, and what do you mean by that?
Absolutely. So the main thing for me between the first ADCC that I did in 2022 and this ADCC in 2024, in 2022 I was happy to be there. I was happy to be participating. I was happy to get to experience what ADCC was, the lights, the cameras, the interviews, all that kind of stuff, being in front of a massive audience. It was exciting. But I didn't really go in there with any intention of making any upsets, or I didn't truly believe that I'd be able to beat these high-level girls. It wasn't until I was actually out there competing against Fionn that I felt that there was a potential that I could win the match, but I don't think I put the time and the energy into the training camp at that stage or into my mentality to really back myself on that. And then fast forward 2 years, I think all up it was like something like 700 days between one ADCC and the other ADCC. So I had 700 days to make improvements and adjustments where I could, and I kind of started straight away. I had a really good team around me. I have been working with a coach of mine. His name is Jake O'Driscoll. He's out of Perth, so I moved to Perth for 3 years during COVID, and then have since moved back. But when I was in Perth, I was introduced to Jake, did a lot of training under Jake. His main focus was ADCC, and he was very well informed about the rule set, about how to take advantage of the rule set, how to capitalize on certain types of competitors, all that kind of stuff. So we worked together through the 2 years in the lead up for the next ADCC to make sure that I was doing what needs to be done in my training camp on and off the mats. And part of that was just increasing the professionalism that I had as an athlete, the respect that I was giving myself as an athlete, to give myself every opportunity to perform at the best possible standard that I could. So, I was very dialed in with what my nutrition looked like in the lead up, and what how my weight cut was going to look, and what my lifting regime looked like, and how many days I was lifting. But to get in even more of the nitty gritties, I would train jiu-jitsu every day. I would do multiple sessions a day. But rather than just getting on the mat and doing a bunch of rounds, it was, what positions are we working on? How are we going to develop particular parts of my game? Okay, when I had other fights between the first ADCC and the second ADCC, when I was out there actually competing, what was my focus while I was out there competing? Was I working on a particular skill? Was I doing skill development within that competition? So there was a lot of very nuanced details that we were dialing in, even between the coach-student relationship, like being able to listen to him, being able to respond to him while I'm competing, and take his advice while I'm competing. All those little things were just something that we developed and put a lot of time and energy into, and we're very specific about how we went about that.
It sounds like you were, and I think you did mention that you were doing specific opposition type of study, or because I've talked to some professional athletes where they take that sort of general approach for ADCC or whatever it may be, competition tournament wise, and their style for whatever it is, they don't do that individual sort of study strategy per person they're going to possibly get partnered up with.
I think there's a fine balance. Like it's not about getting too tunnel vision on what they're going to do. It's important to understand some of the patterns that come up in your competitors' competition career, like positions that they like to play. It's important to be aware of those things, not to the exclusion of actually playing your own game and asserting and imposing your own game. So there's definitely a fine balance. But I think research is important. I'm sure if you spoke to any high-level tennis player, for instance, I think that they've watched previous matches of the opponents that they're sitting in front of. I don't think they're going in there hoping that their tennis is just better. They're going to know, on the third set, this person is going to serve, and then they're going to rush to the net, and then they're going to come back. Like, they are aware of some of the patterns that come up in particular opponents' strategies, and, it's being aware of that is really important. Thinking about how to take advantage of that is really important, but it comes down to, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes, dedication to be sitting there and watching hours of footage. I'm very lucky that I have a team around me that do a lot of that study for me and can summarize that study instead of me myself sitting there. I take advice from the team that's around me because I know that they've put the time and energy and the research into all of my opponents.
Let's talk a bit about your conditioning. You looked great. You looked strong. I'd heard you mention before different types of, in different situations where you were either going up in weight or down in weight, this crazy caloric diet you were doing for a while to try to gain weight to meet certain kilos.
Absolutely. Well, I have, again, like I was saying, I have an amazing team around me that was able to make sure I was well educated in what I was putting in my body and how much I should be lifting and what kind of lifting regime I should be on. So I worked with a guy called Jordan, who his Instagram handle would be the Fight Dietitian. He works with Volkanovski, he works with Adesanya, a bunch of UFC fighters, so he knows his stuff. He's very well informed, but sometimes it was, I need to go up in weight, so I need to increase calories significantly. So the first ADCC that was at 60 kilos, I was eating upwards of 4,000 calories a day, which was just, it's fun for like a day. And then you wake up the next day not hungry and you don't want to eat, but you have to eat. And then you wake up the day after that and you're so not hungry and you just have to eat. On paper, it's like, but it's fun. You get to eat all this food. It's like, in reality, it's putting avocados and peanut butter in a blender and drinking that. And it's just not what everybody thinks it is. But my diet was decently strict. It wasn't anything too crazy. I think closer towards the event, it was clean eating, making sure that it's nothing that's going to upset my stomach, staying away from any heavy oils, manipulating salt for weight reasons, things like that. We had practiced all those things previously though. We weren't just making it up as we went. We had done the exact weight cut, a few months prior, just to make sure that everything was dialed in and everything was practiced, and I knew how my body was going to react to all those things. So that was all dialed in well and truly before I actually stepped onto the mats for ADCC or stepped onto the scales for ADCC. With with the lifting program, I worked with a couple of different people. So I worked with the guys at Bulletproof. They have an app that is very specific towards jiu-jitsu. They themselves are two strength and conditioning coaches, but also black belts. So I've been working with them for quite some time now, just to make sure that the lifting is supplementing the jiu-jitsu and not taking away from the jiu-jitsu. I think that was a big thing for me about, either lifting too heavy and just being a little bit silly with the style of lifting that I was doing, and that was giving me injuries, so I couldn't train as hard, and it was just this fine balance that I was struggling to find. But over time we found a good little sweet spot. But I also worked with the guys at Electrum Performance, which is in San Diego. Alex Sterner was there, and he was also helping me out with just, and that again, when it got closer to the actual event, just making sure that my body was where it should be, making sure that the rehab that I was doing was appropriate, and all that kind of stuff. So everything ended up being a well-oiled machine by the end of it, and I had lifted more regularly than I ever previously did. I was lifting more consistently. My body was feeling stronger, but also much more stable, and I think that was the biggest benefit that I had, that I felt much safer rolling, because my joints, my knees, my hips, everything just felt structurally stronger, and that was keeping me safe through the training camp.
What kind of things are you doing for recovery? Are we talking like ice bath, sauna, Wim Hof? What are you doing?
It's funny you mentioned all of those things. Ice baths are my least favorite thing to do in the world, but you just got to do what you got to do. Sometimes, like if I can do an ice bath in a day, I can conquer the world. Like for me, ice baths are one of the worst things, and I hate ice baths. Saunas were a regular thing that we did. We did saunas for two reasons. We did saunas for just recovery reasons, so making sure that my body had time to relax and muscles had time to heat up and get all the negative byproducts like out of my muscles in general, but also heat acclimation. So if I did have to sit in a sauna when I was cutting weight, that I was more than comfortable doing that, just getting used to that. I actually do Wim Hof. It's funny you mentioned that, because not many people talk about Wim Hof and breathing exercises, but before I compete I do some Wim Hof breathing exercises, some really cool stuff just on YouTube, nothing too crazy, none of his super intense stuff, but more like, let's say, entry level Wim Hof, nothing too crazy. Sundays for me are a rest day. Sundays are active recovery, go for a walk, but just relax and enjoy and stretch and make sure my body has a little bit of time to rebound before Monday swings around.
You mentioned before intensity levels, whether it's in jiu-jitsu training or weight training or et cetera. Was there a time that you would go, pahada, as they would say, all the time? Or is this something you had to learn to sort of, I need to taper it down? And, as I talked to more and more of the elite, I realized they're not going crazy all the time. In fact, it seems to be like the exception.
Yeah, when I was maybe a blue and a purple belt, it was pahada all the time. It was just, a lot of the time I was just like the smallest on the mat, and I was like, there weren't many females around where I was, so I was just, every session was just an opportunity to like prove myself to everybody. It was always like, no, I'm strong, no, I'm fast, no, I'm good at jiu-jitsu, and it was just this justification of, if I just beat people up, then I deserve to be here on the mats. And I think that was an ego thing. Like I am, but I was particularly very competitive. Like with everything I was doing, you don't do a single person sport if you're not competitive as all hell. So like I was very, very competitive, but it was just leading to me getting injuries, and like I wasn't enjoying my time because I was so stressed about losing exchanges, because I was worried about how other people would think about me if somebody passed my guard. They probably thought I was shit at jiu-jitsu if they passed my guard. So it was definitely like a negative feedback loop for me if I got too fixated on just rolling hard all the time. But it's also the output that I put on my body and into these training camps is significant, and if it's just roll harder, then the longevity in the sport just isn't there unless I start just completely abusing God knows what, which I have no intention of ever doing. I just want to make sure that I can do this sport for as long as I possibly can, and that's going to be being sensible about how I'm training. Train smarter, not harder kind of thing.
Can you give us like an aha moment that you've had? With
technique, aha moments I think come all the time. There's people that have a lot of different perspectives on jiu-jitsu than I do. Like it's interesting to see other perspectives, like finishing mechanics of a heel hook. Obviously, like Lockie came in with this aha moment of, well, actually, if you just have good hip positioning on the knee, you don't need the best leg entanglement position. You just need to have breaking mechanics. Like that was a big aha moment for me. I think when you say aha moment, what comes to mind is more towards mentality than actual techniques. I think I had an aha moment. I had a pretty negative relationship towards competition at the early early stages of my brown belt career, when I was doing a lot of gi and when I was still competing internationally in the gi before COVID. And I wasn't enjoying competition. Our training camps were just too hard. I wasn't having a good time. I got to brown belt worlds and just did not want to be there. So I didn't compete well because I wanted to be off the mats. I wanted everything to be done. And then COVID happened, so we had to slow down in competitions. But then at the back end of COVID, the first lot of trials for ADCC in 2021, I want to say, maybe 2022. When those swung around, we got back into a training camp, and I think I had a different approach about how I was going into that training camp, making sure I still had enjoyment. And then by the time the actual competition came around, I was genuinely excited to compete. And I hadn't experienced that in a really, really long time. And I think that was my aha moment of, before I compete now, I step back and I had this moment of, who else gets to do this? Who else gets to travel the world doing the thing that they love with the people they love? There are not many careers in this world where you can do that. And I sit by the side of the mat and I sit there and I force myself to smile like an absolute psychopath, where I literally, like, even if I don't want to smile, I'll make myself smile just to release all the positive endorphins in my body. But that was my aha moment of just take a second to enjoy it. Just take a second to be like, hey, this is pretty cool.
This is fascinating because I hear a lot about this from especially brown belts right about then, and especially brown belts who've competed a lot and they hit this sort of thing. Why do you think that is?
I think it's just like the pressure of you're getting to the top end of things and you're there, but you're not quite there. And this black belt thing seems so unattainable and so just like infinite. It's also, you've been doing it for a while. Like, it's the grind starts to set in, your body starts to get injuries and behaviors that you had as a blue belt that led to like injuries that you're now still rehabbing as a brown belt. They're sitting there and they're niggly. You're waking up sore in the morning and you're kind of over it at that point. I think there's a lot of that going on of just, it is hard to push through that. There's a few times in your jiu-jitsu career where it's that make or break moment. I think one of them is getting your blue belt. Everybody talks about like blue belt blues, where you go white to blue and then the blue belt just disappears because they achieved the first goal of jiu-jitsu, which is get a color belt. And then the second one is towards the end of your brown belt, and that's like that last little push to get your black belt, which just seems so difficult, and it almost seems like you start questioning why you're doing it in the first place. And then you settle into your black belt and you go, okay, I get it. I'm a black belt, but I still know nothing. And that's just what being a black belt is, and that's what doing jiu-jitsu is. Like you said before, those aha moments. I learn from blue belts, purple belts, brown belts, black belts every day, and I still realize how little I know.
Can you tell me a time that you considered quitting and why?
Brown belt worlds. After brown belt worlds, I lost second round to a match that I just threw away. The person who I lost to, fantastic grappler, she's incredible, but I just did not want to be there. I stepped out there. I won my first match and almost was disappointed that I won my first match because I didn't want to get back on. I didn't want to do it. Some of the stuff that was going on in my head was I had done this training camp and it's not going to be worth it because I'm not going to win, like all that negative self-talk. I'd spent X amount of money on a plane flight and my family's here and what a waste of money because I'm not going to win. Like all that negative self-talk started creeping in. And then after that, like I lost second round and just, I remember being super upset and I didn't know whether I was wanting to come back as a competitor. I knew that I loved jiu-jitsu and coaching, but I didn't know whether I'd come back as a competitor. It was almost that I didn't know if I had what it takes to be able to persevere through the ups and downs of competition.
People just don't realize the long road and all of the years and all the ups and downs, obviously.
There's a lot of ups and downs. There's like when we talk about ups and downs, I kind of distinctly remember a moment after Brazilian Nationals when I was in Brazil and I lost in the finals to Maisa in the last like 10 seconds of the match. I was winning the entire match, lost in the last 10 seconds, and like all props to her. She's incredible. She knows how to play the game. And I walked off the mat. I congratulated her coach. I congratulated her, and I walked off to the little kind of bullpen on the side and just started absolutely bawling my eyes out. And in Brazil, there's kind of like, it's a stadium where everybody that's seated is just elevated and then there's the mats that are down the bottom. So I was sitting on the edge kind of near where the stands were, bawling my eyes out, and I just hear somebody calling out to me, just calling my name, Adele. And I kind of look up, and a person who I had never met before in my life, never seen them, like I did not know who they were, and they just kept saying like, lift your head up, like pull your head up, lift your head up, give yourself a second, but essentially like, stop crying, you did amazing, like lift your head up, be proud of yourself. And they just kept yelling it out to me until I stood up and until I like raised my head up and stopped ducking my head down in disappointment, but more like could sit there for a moment and realize what was actually going on around me. And that was a big moment for me, where even in like what I felt at the time was a very low moment, I could still hold my head up and be proud for what I had accomplished up to that point.
A lot of people simply now they associate you with no-gi and they don't realize what a breadth of gi work you have. I've heard you mention before that you would even, well, you are considering, you want to go back and fight in some gi tournaments, and expand on that.
Well, okay, so I started jiu-jitsu, 15 years ago, and obviously back then, gi was the pinnacle of jiu-jitsu. Gi was everything everyone talked about. No-gi was kind of like the, second cousin of what actual jiu-jitsu was. Nobody really did it, and if you did it, you kind of just did it one day a week just because. Like, IBJJF World still has a place in my heart, and something that when I was a kid, I wanted to attain it. I wanted to be a black belt IBJJF Gi World Champion, and I really want to attain that so that I can tell my 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old self that we were able to do it, that we did the thing that we were working towards. And I do get so much joy out of training in the gi. I love the different styles of puzzles that it creates, and my jiu-jitsu style changes significantly gi to no-gi, and I get to play around with a lot of different things and have a lot of different matches with people that don't do no-gi. I have every intention of going back into the gi. I'm probably going to regret saying this, but I want to do the entire gi season at the start of next year. I don't know how much I'm going to regret that, but I definitely want to do it.
Can you talk about the evolution of your coaching?
Well, I'm very privileged to have a lot of amazing coaches around me, so I get a lot of different styles of coaching and get to develop my own style based on what I find works best for me. I get a lot of enjoyment out of coaching. I enjoy passing on knowledge. When I first started, there was a lot of like second guessing. There was a lot of, I'll just watch instructionals and reword that, and because that must be the right way of doing it. Even if I do it this way, this person says that they do it that way, so that's the correct way of doing it. When reality is, jiu-jitsu is made up, and some Brazilians in a garage decided to name things a certain way, and that's the evolution of jiu-jitsu. If it works, it works. It's all made up moves anyway, and I'll tell you how I like to do it and how I do it. So I definitely built confidence in actually being able to relay knowledge and explain my style of jiu-jitsu and how I like to do it. But I also do like positional sparring. I do like allowing my students to have a set goal and try and achieve that goal in their own way, so that people can be creative in their own way, because that's what jiu-jitsu is, finding a way that works for you.
Do you ever down the line ever think about, I'm going to open an academy, or I'm going to have Adele.com, or, what?
I would like to open up an academy at some point. I get a lot of enjoyment out of coaching. I do have a passion for it, and one day I would like to open up my own gym. It's just a matter of when. While I'm still traveling quite a bit and competing quite a bit, it's still probably a decent ways down the line, but at some point I would love to open up my own gym.
What in jiu-jitsu, in terms of like techniques or positions or otherwise, has resonated with you, or more interestingly, hasn't really resonated with you? I know that we're all sort of anatomically different, and, something may not work for everyone. Obviously, this is very contextual, and, there's a million different positions we can be in.
Well, for me, and Nikki Rudd's probably going to listen to this and hate this. I don't, for me, smash passing is pressure passing, smash passing, that Nikki Rudd style of passing, I just cannot for the life of me get to work, or majority of people can't get it to work on me, and I think it's an anatomical thing. Like, I have decent hip mobility. Majority of the girls in my division have decent hip mobility, so it's just a really difficult way of passing. There's obviously people that have gotten it to work at high level, but I think some of that's going to be an anatomical thing. Some of that's also going to be size, strength, that kind of styles. Thing. But yeah, I think different divisions have different styles of jiu-jitsu. The smaller divisions, you'll see like a lot of outside passing, under passing. That's going to be the primary way of passing. With the heavier divisions, pressure passing, staple passing, more so towards that like pressure style of passing.
And what has been resonating with you as of late in terms of jiu-jitsu techniques and things that in the gym that are perhaps that you're just playing with, or you're interested in? What's sort of you're chewing on right now?
I am enjoying just like developing different styles of passing of my own, like outside knee slicing, stealing some stuff from Craig that he had going on. I am enjoying wrestling, surprisingly enough. I went through a big phase where I just absolutely despised wrestling because it was too hard and it was too exhausting. But believe it or not, I actually am now getting a little bit of enjoyment out of wrestling and doing a little bit of stand-up, even some judo here and there. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the next thing I want to necessarily be working on is. I'm not too sure. I think this week and next week will just be very much like playful weeks of experimenting and having a bit of fun. But then we'll get a little bit more into the serious side of things in a few weeks' time, I think.
Are we going to see any Adele instructionals or YouTube channel or anything, or what? Have you thought of that? Maybe future seminars in the States here, or what?
All of the above. So instructionals are in the work at the moment. Keep an eye on the submotor space. Obviously, everybody knows Lockie releasing incredible content out of there, but I would just say like keep an eye on what else is going to be coming out of there sometime soon. Obviously, filming, editing, all that kind of stuff is a little bit time consuming, but we will get some stuff out. Seminars we're just now taking requests, so there's a link on my Instagram bio about taking seminar requests, and now we're just trying to put together a calendar run that makes the most sense with travel. There'll be lots of that going on. And I did an Instagram live the other day, and I had a few people be like, oh, you should start a YouTube channel. So now I'm considering starting a YouTube channel, which is just pretty much match breakdowns and match analysis, and just see if people find any interest in that. I think just giving my perspective on what I think is going on in some matches, and strategically what's going on, and rule set wise how some people took advantage of it and all that kind of stuff. But we'll see how that goes and see if people find some interest in it.
So Adele, how'd you learn to tie your belt?
So when I kind of went up the belt ranks and I was white belt, my coach had a syllabus. Dave had a syllabus for what you needed to know in order to get your blue belt. Part of it was to make sure that everybody was well-rounded, that they, had a very good fundamental knowledge of each position and in the concepts that came from each position. I think number one, so when you get your blue belt, you're very teachable. It's very easy to be like, okay, when you're underneath mount, you do a hip escape, and everybody automatically knows how to do a hip escape, so you're not wasting 20 minutes in a class teaching people how to do hip escapes when they're purple belts and should know how to do hip escapes. But part of that was you need to know how to tie your belt. You're not allowed your blue belt until you learn how to tie your belt. So I learned very quickly how to tie my belt.
What was that, a YouTube video? How'd you learn that?
He taught me. He would tie it up over and over again, and I have a very particular way of tying my belt. It's the double wrap around. You know how some people start in the middle and they wrap it around and they do it that way? I do the double wrap around, so it's pretty and flat, and the two tabs of it are pointing downwards rather than like one pointing up. I'm particular. I'm very particular with some things, and that's one of them.
What do you consider your A game?
Guard, specifically the closed guard overhook. That to me is always just something, positionally it's always resonated with me. I learnt my first closed guard armbar when I was 10 years old, and I still to this day use more or less the same mechanics of my closed guard armbar. It just, positionally it resonated with me, and anatomically I have good hip mobility, flexibility, that it just works quite well for me.
Can you give us any sort of future plans? You've mentioned some stuff. What's on the horizon here?
Well, besides the seminars and the instructionals that will come out, there'll be some matches coming up. I can't announce any of them yet, unfortunately. We're just kind of in that negotiation phase to make sure that everything's making sense. But there will be some matches that are going to come out hopefully soon. Hopefully there'll be a few things before the end of the year. But I want to stay active. I don't want to just fall off the face of the earth after this win. I want to continue to be active and continue to evolve. I think now that I have a target on my back, I don't want to slow down. I want to continue to stay ahead as much as I can.
One of the things I want to bring up, and it seems like a recurring theme throughout your life, really, including the person who is in the stands telling you to lift your head, is it seems like you've always been sort of surrounded by supportive individuals, that have lifted you up throughout, ever since you were 10, even your parents taking you to the closest martial arts academy. Look where you are now.
I think it's really important to have supportive people around you. Both of my parents work corporate, so for them to have faith in me that I wanted to pursue a competition career, a sporting career, was something that was a little bit different to them, but they never wavered in the support that they gave me. They trusted that I would put the time and the energy into it, and drove me to all the training sessions and all the competitions, and were in the stands at ADCC as well. So they've been nothing but supportive from day one. My coaches, I've been really lucky to be surrounded by a bunch of very, very supportive coaches that were a major part in allowing me to believe that I could achieve and accomplish these things. There was a period of time where I thought jiu-jitsu was going to be a little bit of a hobby and I was going to pursue a different career, but they kept reinforcing the fact that it could be a career, it could be a long-term thing, I could make it work. My partner, who from day one just has always had my back and always motivated me and reassured me that I'm doing the right thing and that I have her support, and even to the extent where, you know, she does match review for me, and she started training and now she's in love with it, and now she knows more.
What is she, a blue belt, purple belt, something like that now?
She's a blue belt. She's a blue
That's
belt.
fantastic.
And I made it that she had to learn how to tie a belt before I gave her a blue belt, don't worry. It was part of the criteria. But she's been absolutely supportive. She travels with me around the world, even though she has her own career that she's growing. She's a dentist and just recently graduated as a valedictorian of her cohort. So she's in awe of all the amazing things that she accomplishes in her career, but also finds the time to travel with me and support me in my career. So.
Well, Adele, why didn't she do the Australian time conversion for us so we could have planned this more effectively? What are me and you doing, doing math, for God's sake? You've got a valedictorian in your home.
She definitely could have done it. She could have done a way better job at it than I could. I majorly overestimated my own skills of being able to do the maths on that. But
well, another thing I'd like to know is some of your heroes.
That's a tough one because I get to know most of my heroes. I get to actually interact and roll with and speak to most of my heroes. So, like, there's a lot of local people I see as being my heroes, like Lachie, who was able to accomplish such incredible things on the world stage, like Liv, who really was at the forefront of female jiu-jitsu in Australia and was doing it when nobody else was doing it. But also, like, all the guys abroad, like, I get to train and be mentored by Andre Galvao. His resume is just endless of all the amazing things that he's been able to achieve, as well as Angelica, who was able to have a career of her own that was absolutely outstanding. I got to roll with Mackenzie Dern the other day, who I remember looking up to when I was very young and taking things from her game and putting it into my own game. It's just, the list is honestly endless, and I know that I'm going to leave people out and listen back to this and be disappointed that I've left people out, but we couldn't be, and the generation that is my generation could not be doing what we do without the generation before us setting the foundations.
What do you see in the future for yourself?
I see this as only just being the beginning. I truly believe that this is only the beginning for me. This is my second year being a black belt. I'm just getting started, and I want to continue doing what I'm doing as long as I love it. And I want multiple ADCC world titles, multiple IBJJF world titles. I'm coming for everything. I'm coming for all of it, and I want to bring it all back to Australia so everybody here can celebrate with me as well.
And the future of jiu-jitsu, what's it looking like to you?
I hope that it just continues to build in how professional it is as a sport. I think that that's going to be what allows the evolution of jiu-jitsu to just increase. Getting these athletes paid is going to be a really important thing so that they can afford all the things that they deserve to be able to afford to have longevity in the sport. Better funding, more ability to kind of commercialize these events so that it gets to a mainstream audience. I think One Championship is doing an excellent job at that as well, with the platform they're creating and bringing jiu-jitsu to millions of eyes around the world. I just hope that it keeps growing. I hope that it keeps growing and improving and offering more opportunities for the next generation that comes after me.
It sure looks like it, and it looks like you're at the epicenter of just an exciting time right now, and you're just primed to go. I'm so excited to see what comes next for Adele here.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Well, Adele, where can we get more information about you and everything that you're up to?
To kind of keep track of what I'm up to and what I'm doing and where I'm training and all that kind of stuff, I think the main way is to follow me on Instagram. My handle is Adele Fornarino. If you do listen to this in the extended future, the handle will change to Daddy Adele at some point, but we're waiting for the timing on it. But I will have a YouTube channel that's going to come out, but main way is just going to be through Instagram.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for your time. I'm your host, Adolfo Frana. Don't forget, we have the VIP, $1 a month, early episodes, and uncensored and the whole thing. You'll love it. Give us the whole 5-star review, subscribe, and everything. Thanks so much for listening again. Adele, I can't tell you what this means to me. It's really exciting to have you on, and I appreciate it, and I hope we can do part 2 soon.
Absolutely, Adolfo. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. See you guys next time.